Everyone assumed the ancients carved these caves as simple shelters, rough work for a rough purpose. But when modern technology scans the interior, it finds geometric precision measurable in millimeters, mirror-polished surfaces, bilateral symmetry across entire chambers. And that discovery forces a question. If this was just a shelter, why did they build it so precisely? And how on earth did they do it? Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Michael. I have a degree in ancient history, and on this channel, we discuss the unexplainable mysteries of our past. Let's get into it. We're told these caves were carved over 2,000 years ago into solid granite, with no modern machinery, no known tool system that easily explains the speed, finish, and precision. Just people. And according to the historical record, they did this to give wandering ascetics somewhere to wait out the monsoon rain. But when researchers scan the interior of those caves today, they find geometric precision measurable in millimeters, surfaces so flat and so smooth they reflect light like a mirror. Now, you don't need millimeter level geometry to stay dry, so how did they achieve this? Well, let's start with what we actually know. The Barabar caves sit in the Jahanabad district of Bihar in northeastern India, carved into exposed granite outcrops in a low, rocky hillside. 7 main chambers spread across 2 adjacent groups, Barabar and Nagarjuni, close enough that most researchers treat them together, and they are, by current academic consensus, among the very oldest surviving rock-cut caves in India, possibly the oldest. The dating places them in the Mauryan period, roughly the 3rd century BC. That's the era of Ashoka, the emperor who, after a bloody military campaign, renounced violence, embraced Buddhism, and spent the rest of his reign building infrastructure, carving edicts into rock faces across the subcontinent, and reportedly donating these specific caves to a sect of wandering ascetics called the Ajivikas. Inscriptions inside the caves reference Ashoka. Some reference his grandson, Dasharatha, and while mainstream archaeology firmly attributes the construction to the Mauryan era under Ashoka, the inscriptions themselves primarily record royal donation rather than the act of carving. There is no mention of when they were carved, how they were carved, or by whom, but they are attributed to Ashoka. That is the official account. But here's the thing about that account. It tells us who once gifted the caves, but it tells us absolutely nothing about who made them. When most people picture ancient Indian rock-cut architecture, they think of Ajanta or Ellora. They think of elaborate facades, sculpted reliefs, painted ceilings, columns carved to look like bundled reeds, figures frozen mid-gesture in stone. Grand, visual, and decorative. But Barabar is none of those things. The interiors are nearly empty. There are no carvings, no ornamentation, no figures on the walls, just the stone itself, shaped into precise chambers. And that minimalism, that complete absence of decoration, is the first strange thing, because everything that came later in Indian rock-cut architecture reached for more detail, more surface, more visual complexity. Yet Barabar reached for something different. Smoothness, geometry, control. And for a long time, that wasn't especially examined. The caves were acknowledged, dated, attributed, and filed away. Interesting, ancient, noted. It wasn't until researchers started applying modern measurement, like 3D scanning, point cloud analysis, and systematic geometric surveys, that the full picture started to emerge. These detailed measurements come primarily from independent 3D laser scanning, conducted in recent years by researchers including a team of former stonemasons, often associated with projects like those featured in this Giant Films documentary. Using high-precision tools such as Faro laser scanners, they captured millions of data points across the chamber surfaces. But what they found didn't simplify the story. No, it complicated it considerably.
Now, before we dive into that, a quick thank you to Opera for sponsoring this video. If you've seen my workflow, you'll know it's chaos. I have 25 tabs open, academic papers, excavation reports, satellite maps, random PDFs, and at some point it just becomes digital archaeology. That's why I've been using Opera. First, Opera AI. It's been rebuilt to be faster, smarter, and honestly, it's perfect for research. I can just ask it to analyze the page I'm on, no screenshots, no copying links, no extra tabs, no account needed. and it summarizes long papers instantly. It can even pull context or check sources while I'm still on the same page, and it's completely free. Then there's Tab Islands. I group everything by project, one island for this video, one for future ideas, one for sponsorship admin, and collapse them when I don't need them. My browser finally looks structured. I can name them and even choose a color. Split screen is brilliant too. I'll drag a tab down and compare two sources side by side, sometimes even 4 at once, which makes fact checking way faster. And when I'm watching an interview or a lecture, I just pop the video out and move it anywhere on my screen while I keep working. So if you live online like I do, then Opera genuinely makes it smoother. So check it out via the link in my description and my pinned comment. Thanks so much to Opera for sponsoring, and now let's get back to the video.
Here's a distinction that matters. There is a difference between smooth and flat. A surface can be smooth to the touch, soft, frictionless, and polished, but still subtly curved or uneven across a larger span. And a surface can be geometrically flat, mathematically planar, but rough in texture. Getting both simultaneously across a large surface area in hard stone is significantly harder than getting either one alone. But at Barabar, the interior surfaces appear to be both. The walls and ceilings of certain chambers have been polished to a near mirror finish, not coated, not treated with a separate material, polished directly. The granite itself worked until it reflects. The finish is consistent. It runs across curved sections, across the junctions between wall and ceiling, across vertical surfaces that would require working upward in confined space. And granite is not a cooperative material. It is one of the hardest stones that occurs naturally. It resists tools. It chips unpredictably. When modern stonemasons examine what was achieved here, their reaction is consistent. Not admiration, although they are impressed, but confusion, because this isn't just good craftsmanship for the period. This is precision that working professionals with modern tools and modern training describe as extreme. Extreme precision, at least 2,000 years ago. With no record of construction, it's odd. The scans change how you see the problem. Researchers applying 3D point cloud analysis to several of the chambers captured millions of individual data points. From those points, they were able to reconstruct the geometry of the rooms with high accuracy, and when they analyzed it, they found something that isn't visible to the naked eye standing inside. Measurable bilateral symmetry, not approximate or rough, but symmetry, holding within tolerances of about 2 to 3 millimeters, and not just across small sections, but across the full span of the entire chambers. Now that's worth thinking about. 2 to 3 millimeters, across rooms carved by hand into solid granite over 2,000 years ago. The geometry isn't just visually pleasing, it's structural. The ceiling curves in a consistent cylindrical arc. The walls angle inward at controlled gradients. The transitions between surfaces, wall to floor, wall to ceiling, are clean, deliberate, and repeating. What the scans show is not a space that grew organically as workers chipped away. It was a space that was planned, modeled in some form before the cutting began. But here's what the scans cannot show. They cannot show how it was done. Every craft tradition leaves a record of its own development. You can trace the evolution of Greek temple architecture through increasingly refined prototypes. You can watch Roman masonry techniques improve across centuries of practice. You can see, in the archaeological record, the errors and experiments that preceded mastery. The rough attempts, the slightly off-center columns, the walls that lean a degree too far. That developmental path is how we understand capability, and it's how capability actually works. You don't arrive at extreme precision, you inch toward it. Trial, error, refinement, repetition over generations. The finished thing, when it comes, shows the marks of everything that came before it. But at Barabar, that path is largely absent. There are no obvious prototypes, no nearby caves that display anywhere near the same level of ambition at a cruder level of execution, no visible sequences of attempts getting progressively closer to what we see in the finished chambers. And when stonemasons are showed the interior work, the assessment that comes back is specific. This doesn't look like the beginning of something, it looks like the end. Like a tradition already fully formed, already at the top of a long curve of mastery we simply cannot locate. You can't just start here, and that's the uncomfortable part. Work like this is what mastery looks like after a long process of learning. So that process itself should be visible somewhere. At Barabar, it isn't. But let's go back to the inscriptions, because this is where the story gets genuinely ambiguous, and the ambiguity is important. The inscriptions themselves are not the controversial part. Several reference Ashoka by name, recording that he donated the cave to the Ajivakas in the 19th year of his reign. Others reference Dasharatha, his grandson, making similar donations. These are genuine historical artifacts, and they are accepted as such. But donation is not the same as construction. When a modern government donates a building to a cultural institution, it doesn't mean the government built it. When a wealthy patron gives an ancient church to a religious order, the inscription recording the gift tells you about the patron, not the architect. The inscriptions at Barabar tell us with reasonable confidence who assigned the caves, who gave them over to use, who formalized that relationship in carved text, but they do not explicitly state these caves were built during the reign of Ashoka. Some researchers have noted that certain inscriptions appear to have been added to already existing surfaces, rather than carved as part of the original construction. Some names within the text appear to have been modified. The inscriptions, in other words, may be later than the caves themselves. Now that is not a fringe position. It is an open question in the literature. And it matters, because if these caves predate their inscriptions, the Mauryan attribution may describe who used them, not who made them. But now onto something yet more mysterious, the function problem. This is where the mainstream explanation becomes hardest to defend. What were these caves for? The Ajivakas were ascetics, wanderers, associated with austerity, renunciation, and extreme ascetic practice, a sect that regarded material comfort as spiritually beside the point. And the standard account proposes that the Barabar caves were donated to them as rain shelters. Now, set aside for a moment the precision, set aside the polish and the geometry, just ask the question on its own terms. Why would the most austere ascetic sect in Mauryan India require rain shelters polished to a mirror finish? A rough cave does the same job. An unfinished overhang stops rain. A basic rock shelter keeps a person dry. The functional requirements demand none of what Barabar actually contains. The polish serves no sheltering function. The bilateral symmetry serves no sheltering function. The precise geometric volumes also serve no sheltering function. The explanation and the object do not match, not because the caves are mysterious, but because the stated purpose doesn't account for the stated features. And when that gap opens up in any historical explanation, the honest response isn't to ignore it. It's to ask what the explanation is missing. Here's the comparison that sharpens the problem most clearly. Ellora, Ajanta, the great rock-cut complexes that came centuries after Barabar. These are the sites that draw the crowds, the photographs, the documentary coverage, and they deserve it. They are extraordinary achievements, massive multi-story facades, columns rising from single granite blocks, sculpted figures of enormous scale and detail, painted ceilings, complex spatial sequences that move through light and shadow with apparent deliberateness. Later India built bigger, but not more precise. Visually and technically, Ellora appears to be optimized for grandeur rather than the same minimalist precision. The surface finish, impressive as it is, does not achieve the same reflective quality. What was being optimized for is clearly different. Ellora was optimized for grandeur, for visual experience, for religious narrative expressed in stone. But Barabar was optimized for something else. Something that later Indian rock architecture, for all its extraordinary ambition, did not pursue. And that inversion, earlier and more precise, is not the pattern you'd expect from a tradition developing forward through time. Usually things get better, more refined, more capable. At Barabar, you are looking at the oldest examples, and some of the most exact. Now, on top of all of this, there is one more dimension to the caves that researchers have begun examining more carefully, and it's a weird one: sound. These spaces don't behave like normal rooms. The interiors of certain Barabar chambers produce unusual acoustic behavior, long reverberation times, decay that extends well beyond what you'd expect from a volume this size. Certain frequencies appear to be amplified selectively. Spoken words at certain distances become strangely difficult to resolve, consonants blurring into a sustained hovering tone. It is possible this is simply a natural consequence of the geometry. Sound bounces off flat, highly polished surfaces differently than it bounces off rough ones. A precise dome or cylinder holds waves in particular ways. The chambers may produce these effects simply because of what they are, not because anyone planned for them. But the possibility cannot be entirely dismissed that the acoustic behavior was understood, and that this is part of what these spaces were made to do. We don't know. That is the honest position. What we can say is this: the geometry that produces the visual precision also produces the acoustic signature. They are not separate properties. They are the same object, experienced two different ways. And that coherence, where everything you examine turns out to be connected, is usually a sign that something was thought through very carefully indeed. So where does that leave us? Not with an answer, not with a confirmed conspiracy, not with a lost civilization neatly identified. No, what it leaves us with is a set of observations, that don't fit comfortably into the space the standard explanation provides. Surfaces polished beyond any functional requirement, geometry precise to millimeters, measurable only with modern technology, bilateral symmetry across entire chambers, acoustic properties that emerge from the same geometry, a tradition that appears to arrive fully formed, with no visible path of development behind it, inscriptions that record donation, not construction, a stated function, rain shelter, that explains none of the features we are actually looking at, and modern stonemasons, with all their knowledge and their tools, describing the precision as extreme. Each of these alone can probably be rationalized. Together, they accumulate into something harder to resolve. Not a proof, a pressure. The sense that the box we filed this in is slightly the wrong shape for what's inside it. These caves do not prove a lost civilization. They prove something subtler, and maybe more important, that the explanation we inherited may not fit the caves themselves, because we still haven't fully explained them. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or subscribing to my channel down below. I'll see you next time.